Welcome to ACD-Combatives, your combatives and control tactics channel. Please like, subscribe, and share. Guys, Coach Kurt. So let's talk about the use of force and how it correlates with the level of crime or the type of crime that is committed. Generally speaking, and this is something that bothers me, is you hear about this or you see it on CNN, cops shoot a man during a traffic stop. Why the heck did the cops shoot the guy for running a stop sign or something silly like that? I can't put my finger on a very specific incident, but we've seen this type of news reporting over and over and over and over, and it's very frustrating. Basically speaking, the Supreme Court gave us Graham v. Connor. That is what I teach, and that's what my agency teaches. It's the Supreme Court federal case law that rules them all. Your agency might have state laws that restrict things even more, or agency policy that restricts things even more. But at the core, you've got Graham v. Connor. When you get to the meat and potato of use of force, it's not minimal force. It's not maximum force. It is reasonable force. Your force has to be objectively reasonable for the encounter. So let's talk more about that. And we'll even cover more force now equals less force later. I teach that all the time too when I'm teaching use of force. And in my control tactic sessions, I teach techniques that sometimes emphasize that. Anyway, so the police stop somebody because they run a stop sign. Let's just use something generic like that. And one thing leads to another, and they end up shooting the guy. Things like this happen. It wasn't because of the fact the guy ran a stop sign. That was just the reason the police made contact with him. And people are like, well, police had more important things to do. That's neither here or there. If you're a traffic cop or if you're doing your job and you see violation, you address violation. I'm not saying you have to cite every violation, depending on your jurisdiction or your job. Like if you're a traffic cop, you're basically probably going to cite for everything. That's unfortunate, but there's a lot of cities that do that because it's a great source of revenue. But if we take all that away, we strip all that away from it. Nowadays, there's so many restrictions on what cops can and can't do that sometimes the best way and the only way for us to look for and find criminals is what we call criminal patrol. You're actively making contact with as many people as you can, and you're sniffing out the possibility of criminals. That's how you find the warrants. That's how you find the criminals, by just making contact. And your spider senses tingle. You see that based on so many years of training experience, you see that vehicle that looks suspicious because of the type of vehicle it is. You recognize maybe the driver. Oh, wait a minute, that's Billy Bob Thornton. And I'm picking on Billy Bob Thornton. I'm sure he's a great guy, but I love the sound of his name, Billy Bob Thornton. Billy Bob is a known criminal. I know he has criminal history, so I'm going to follow Billy Bob because I know he's always up to something. Guys, that's completely fine. That's called good police work. I see and recognize criminals that I'm making contact with on a regular basis. There's times where I'm on a first-name basis with some of these criminals over the years, and you know so much about them, and they know so much about you. It's kind of funny sometimes. I remember a guy I arrested like 8 times before I transferred to a different duty station. It's silly, but it's true. So you recognize Billy Bob, and you follow him, and you're like, I know he's up to something, and he runs a stop sign, so you stop him. Well, unannounced to you, maybe this is the time Billy Bob says, screw it. If I get arrested one more time, I'm going to prison for good. Some states have the three strikes, you're out type laws. Or maybe Billy Bob's got some drugs in the trunk, or maybe he's got a dead body in the trunk, or who knows? We're getting creative here. But this is that time where things are going to go shitty for you and Billy Bob. Okay, so you approach the window and Billy Bob starts shooting and you shoot back, and now Billy Bob's dead because he ran a stop sign. I know that's an extreme sounding scenario, but this kind of stuff plays out all the time in the streets of America all the time. I mean, cops, this is what you do. You do criminal patrol. Sometimes things go bad, and that's just the way it is. So you can't blame the cop for having to shoot the guy in self-defense because he tried to shoot him first and he responded by using deadly force in this example that I gave you. So I hope that's a very black and white way of explaining what I'm trying to talk about. So let's talk about Graham v. Connor and how will I be judged? Objectively reasonable. What were the facts of the situation? And we're not looking for emotions. I tell trainees, I'm not an FTO anymore, but when I was an FTO, I was like, courts don't care about how you feel, at least not the federal courts. Basically, generally speaking, the courts don't care how you feel. So if you respond with, I feel threatened, I felt in fear for my life, that is such a BS way to respond, and that's not what the courts want to hear. That's not what you should be putting in your reports, and that's not what you should be thinking. You need to break it down into its little bitty parts. Why did you feel threatened? Well, we have what we call Graham factors, and you've probably heard me use that. Those are the little factors of the incident that you accumulate to form your response. What was the severity of the crime? Was there immediately a threat at hand? Was the individual actively resisting, attempting to evade arrest by flight? I mean, these are all things that you would think about. Number of suspects versus officers, duration of the action, size, age, condition, officer versus the suspect. These are all things you would think about. Like, is this guy bigger, stronger, more athletic than me? Did I just get out of, knee surgery 8 weeks ago and I'm still kind of iffy, but I have to go back to work? These are all things you have to put into consideration. Violent history known to the suspect. Like in my example, I said, hey, I knew Billy Bob. Billy Bob is a known criminal and he's always up to no good. This is something that you would take into consideration. And the average officer in your situation, your coworkers would understand that. And that's kind of something too under Graham v. Connor. It has to be objectively reasonable force. You can't judge somebody on 20/20 hindsight. You have to judge them on what that officer knew and understood at the moment. Even if it was wrong, for example, it was a fake gun. The officer did know it was fake. He shot him. Well, you can't judge the officer when you shot the guy because he had a fake gun. That's not fair. Stuff like that. And then you would judge the individual, the actions taken by the officer. Were they objectively reasonable? And would another officer with the same level training experience have done something similar? It doesn't have to be the exact same thing because we're all going to do things a little differently. But would they look at that? A professional in your profession, look at what you did and say, yeah, that's pretty reasonable. I might have done this or that a little differently, but yeah, what he did was very reasonable, or what she did was very reasonable. These are all things that you would take into consideration. Weapons, do they have weapons? Do they not have weapons? If they're so big, strong, and athletic that they are the weapon. The guy's a bodybuilder, the guy is a known MMA fighter, that kind of stuff. It's also important to know about the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the individual officer. And I'm going to use the example of two control tactic instructors that I know personally. One is 6'5", like 230 pounds, 5 years of Marine Corps martial arts, excessively athletic and strong, high pain tolerance, and just an all-around badass. Now, the other one, still very super skilled Muay Thai instructor, boxing coach, but she is 5'3" and like 120 pounds, if that, soaking wet, probably even lighter. Now, she's very athletic. She works out excessively, but she's still 5'3", and she's still only like 120 pounds. And then you also have to take in consideration the perception of those officers. Both look very sharp. Both are very charismatic people. Both have great officer safety and great personalities. But if you're 6'5" and 240 pounds, it's easier to de-escalate situations just from your mere presence than if you're a 5'3" female officer. And these are things that you have to take into consideration, and you have to be self-aware of these situations yourself. If you're a smaller officer, you're gonna have to be really good at the gift of gab. But you also have to create space better. You have to shoot, move, communicate better, just being more mobile. And it's going to be understandable that more force now equals less force later. And we'll get back into that here in a second. But you're going to want to use your tools. A smaller officer is going to want to use their tools more, create space. The bigger officer, it can get away with less technique or just using strength or intimidation. The little officers, or you're like me, I'm 5'9", 180 pounds. I'm an average dude at best. just even that, us mere mortals have to do things differently. You got to know your own conditions, your own knowledge, skills, and abilities, and you have to be very realistic. All right, so I've gone on for about 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. I hope I got to the point. The crime itself doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the level of force that is used if and when the officer has to use force. Sometimes crap just happens. Sometimes things get violent because the use of force is not pretty. Too many movies where cops are doing Steven Seagal ninja crap that doesn't actually work in real life has got people thinking that all cops are ninjas, and that is far from the truth. Of course, you're going to want to use the gift of gab, de-escalate your verbal judo as much as possible. Sometimes that just isn't going to happen. There's days that shit is going to hit the fan, and there's not a damn thing anybody can do about it. You have to be prepared for the worst day of your life. And the worst day of your life means that sometimes you're going to have to use force, and you can't predict how much force it's going to be. You just have to trust in your knowledge, skills, and abilities, your training, and you need to do the right thing based on Graham v. Connor. That's another thing we covered in the video. What is it? Reasonably objective. You have to train to be reasonably objective and recognize the world around you, everything that's going on that contact and that stop. You have to be self-aware, and you just have to be good at your job. I hope I covered everything. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to reach out and say, no, you didn't cover this or you should have covered that, please do so. This is not just me gabbing, even though I'm always just gabbing. Reach out in the comments and let me know that you should cover this, or maybe you need to cover more of that, or what have you. All right, everybody, please like, subscribe, and share, and everybody stay safe.
Let's roll.